When William the Conqueror invaded in 1066, he set about making a complete inventory of all the land in Britain, and this was written up as the Domesday Book. William took about 1/5 of England for himself. He gave a quarter to the church, and he split the rest up between a few rich barons and lords who supported him. But the vast majority of people, the poor farmers and peasants, weren't allowed to own land. Large areas of the countryside weren't farmed at all, but they provided land for hunting, which formed a fundamental part of life in the Middle Ages, not just as a leisure pursuit for the rich lords, but also as a way of getting food on the table. Strict laws were passed so that no peasant could hunt or poach on the lord's land, but importantly they were granted rights over land such as heaths and forests, where they could graze animals and collect fuel. The rabbit was first brought to Britain by the Normans as a source of food, and they quickly established themselves in the Lincolnshire countryside on the light sandy soils of the heathland. Later on in the medieval period, it became very fashionable to trim clothing with fur, and earth mounds called warrens were built to breed rabbits in large numbers. For the local peasants, the rabbit was a good meal, and the Lincolnshire men soon became famous for their poaching skills. By the early 1700s, the production of rabbit fur had become a hugely important part of the economy of Lincolnshire. The industry was centred on brig, and thousands of rabbit skins from the surrounding countryside arrived to be treated and exported out to London or abroad, where they were used for trimming and lining garments. The light sandy soils of the heathland were perfect for warrens, and this 1832 map shows the extent of warrens in the county. In the south of the county, near the fenland edge, millions of wildfowl bred every year, and here special ponds called decoys were built to trap the birds. Decoy ponds usually had a number of arms running off the main pond, which were covered in netting. The birds would be driven down these arms by men on boats on the pond, and in this way would be caught in the nets. Before the fens were drained in Lincolnshire, wildfowl were so numerous that in 1720 on a single pond, 3,000 ducks were caught and killed on one day. Hunting and shooting have always been a way of life for the wealthy landowners, and when the rabbit fur industry died out in the 19th century, the heathlands on large country estates were ideal for breeding game birds such as pheasants. Crosby Warren was part of the Sheffield family estate, and in 1905 Sir Berkeley Sheffield employed a young gamekeeper called Walter Atkinson to breed and raise pheasants and protect them from poachers.
My grandfather was known as Walter Atkinson and came from Farndon near Newark, Nottinghamshire, and took up the position of underkeeper to the Sheffield family, Sir Berkeley Sheffield. His contract was in the form of this deputation here, which is dated 6th of June 1905, and it lists all the work that he had to be in charge of, I suppose, that he had to do, which was part of his daily routine and work, and it was all officially signed and documented. As a young man of 23 years, apparently, when he came, and I suspect that it was when he got married around that age. There's a discrepancy with the births of some of the members of the family, in 1897 or 1898, the eldest one was born. But without the birth certificates, I can't really establish that. But he did, his duties basically were to rear pheasants, ready for the shoots, and just control the land, keep it mainly from poachers, and I suppose they were just as bad in them days as they are today. He had to look after the woods. I mean, everything, the firewood and everything was free to him. But, it stemmed, he would have a few chickens, etc. He would have to look after the dogs, he would exercise the dogs, and just generally go all around the land, just making sure that it was maintained and, like I said, no poaching, that the pheasants were being reared. And it's a difficult job rearing pheasants from a young age. You know, when you get in, you put them under the hens, the eggs under the hens, and then the little chicks, you have to watch for the foxes and all the other predators. He was given the tenancy to rent this place down on Crosby Warren. I suppose it was a form of promotion, a move up for him. It was very isolated, no electricity. It was all sort of gaslight, gas mantle, quite spooky. It must have been terribly dark at night, especially for my grandma and bringing up youngsters. He was never in. He absolutely loved his job, lived for his job. And whether it was night time or not, he would be out looking for poachers. You know, he just loved it.
Walter Atkinson lived in the house on Crosby Warren for 50 years, and he became so well known locally that people came to call the area Atkinson's or Acky's Warren. When he died, the house became empty and was eventually demolished. But still today, the area is known as Atkinson's Warren, in memory of its most famous gamekeeper.